Thank you very much, Chairperson. Just briefly, should we refer to you as Mr. or as Colonel Mulife? Or is the title of Colonel an appropriate one to refer to you? Or we can just refer to you as Mr. Mulife? When we dealt with the terms of reference for this process that we're engaged in, we ultimately adopted a document which said that the object of this process is to investigate allegations of governance failures at Eskom, Transnet, and Dinel. And broadly because of a genuine observation that had been made that there's a family, a Gupta family, whom you say you have visited recurrently, which appoints board members of state-owned companies, influence the appointment of senior executive, determines how procurement should be handled and who should be recipient of such procurement. So amongst others, that is the context within which we are working at. So all the questions that we're going to deal with here are ultimately directed towards finding certainty in terms of what we're dealing with. So you're previously with PIC, so did you have any work in between PIC and Transnet?
When I left PIC, I had an agreement with Investec, where we agreed to look for investments in property with the Investec Property Division, so we were going to work together to identify these opportunities. But eventually, I decided that I would go to Transnet, and that is where I went.
You decided that you're going to go to Transnet, or you were approached that you must go to Transnet?
I decided to go to Transnet.
There was a vacancy there and then you applied for it?
Yes, there was a vacancy for a chief executive officer.
Okay, at what time did you meet with the members of the Gupta family? Was it during that time of working for Investec, or after you had been employed in Transnet, or far much earlier?
Before. I have said that they had applied for funding at the PIC, which we declined. So I knew them by then.
So of those Gupta members, who did you specifically had met before? Ajay, Atul, or?
Mr. AJ Gupta.
Which one?
AJ.
AJ.
Yeah.
So that is the one that you had relations with. So when you're working for Investec, was there a time where Fana Hlongwane came to you and said that they can find you a better job elsewhere than working for Investec in a small desk?
No.
You have never had any interaction with Fana Hlongwane during that period?
No, I met Fana Hlongwane at Norman Mashabane's funeral. We talked a little bit, that was it.
And before you applied for the Transnet job, did you ever meet with Mr. Jacob Zuma in that period there?
No, I did not meet with Mr. Jacob Zuma.
Did you meet with any members of the Gupta family or any of the following people, Salim Issa or Gary Peter or Nazim Hoa or Anand Singh, before you took the job in Transnet?
No. I actually have never met Mr. Salim Issa. Gary Peter, I met at Transnet. I also met Anand Singh at Transnet.
So when did Anand Singh arrive in Transnet? Before or after he had arrived there?
At Transnet?
Yes.
Anand Singh, I found him at Transnet.
You found him there?
Yeah, there was a Mr. There was an acting Wells. Mr. Chris Wells was the CFO.
And Gary Peter, you found him there as well.
Yeah, Gary Peter was there as well.
And have you ever met with Eric Wood?
I think Eric Wood came to Transnet once, wanting to do a hedge, some kind of a transaction, a financial, very complicated transaction that even I found I didn't understand, and I dismissed him, and I said, no, I don't understand.
Have you ever met with Nazim Hoa?
Yes, Nazim was at the New Age.
You met him when you were in Transnet?
When I was at Transnet.
And then what was the context of the meeting?
He was at the New Age. They wanted sponsorship for the breakfasts. They wanted... he called me about news-related things for the New Age at the time.
And what ended up happening? Did you end up giving them any contract from Transnet?
Yeah, the Transnet did sponsor the New Age breakfasts, but yeah, we did sponsor the New Age, several of the New Age breakfasts.
And then has Duduzane Zuma ever spoken to you about anything when you were in Transnet, or maybe later on when you were in ESCOM?
No, we have never spoken about anything with Mr. Duduzane Zuma. But I have met him. We were at some birthday party of a one-year-old child, and he came.
And then when you were working in Transnet, how would you rate your performance there? You think that you had brought some degree of stability and proper governance in the executive when you were there? How would you rate your performance in Transnet?
My performance was rated by the board, and
what were their observations?
I can't remember that the board had issues of underperformance from myself.
So everything else was fine there?
Yes.
And then who approached you to go to ESCOM? You decided as well that they're going to go to ESCOM?
No, it was Minister Brown who said, look, we have very serious problems at ESCOM. Would you consider going there on an acting capacity? And then
when did she come to you to say that would you consider going to?
I can't remember the exact date. I can't remember, but it's before I went to ESCOM.
But were you aware who is leadership of ESCOM at the group chief executive level at that time when she approached you?
Was I aware of?
Who was leading ESCOM at that particular time?
Yo, there were problems there. People were suspended and so on and so forth. I didn't know what was happening.
So you don't remember that there was a person called Mr. Matuna who had just been appointed less than 6 months and had just been suspended as well. Former DG of Public Enterprises, which is a department which we are reporting to, who had just arrived there, and then they say, new CEO of ESCOM, I'm sure you possibly knew about that because the former DG of Public Enterprises, and then Minister Brown comes to you and say that, would you consider acting in ESCOM?
Did you say Mr. Matuna had been suspended?
Yeah, because isn't it that you said that when they approached you, there was a problem in ESCOM?
Yes. Mr. Matuna was suspended.
So you're not worried that, okay, here is the DG whom, as Transnet will report to, he was working as a DG of the Department of Public Enterprises within the 6 months. He is now an executive in ESCOM. He is suspended, and now they're saying I must go and take the responsibility. Didn't that raise some red flag around your thought process?
At about that time, I actually had gone to a bank during the day to do something at the bank. And I arrived at the bank, at the Standard Bank branch. And I found the manager at 11 o'clock during the day standing outside with his arms folded. And he said, you can't go into the bank because there's no electricity. At about that time, I remember being caught up in traffic in Sandton. Sandton, during load shedding in the evening, became pitch black, very dark. And it took hours to get from Sandton to Irene, where I stay. And I was very angry as a South African that Sandton has shut down. Sandton needs candles. A branch of Standard Bank is not operating at 11 o'clock during the day because of load shedding. I was very angry. And when the minister said, would you go to ESCOM to help solve those problems? I said, yes, I will go and do my best.
Do you know why I'm raising the issue of Mr. Matuna is because when he came to give evidence here, he says that he was employed as GCE, and then a new board was appointed, like new board members were added into ESCOM, and in a meeting which is supposed to be their induction, they suspended him without clear reason of why he's being suspended. And then he said that he didn't want to waste his money fighting against a huge state-owned company and going up and down and all of those things because he didn't have the deep pockets. And amidst that, you are then brought as a GCE. Didn't you question what happened to the previous CEO? I want to have a handover process of what was happening before, because actually one of the things that Tsidiso Matuna says, or Mr. Matuna says, I don't know if that is the correct name, the first name, he says that Brian can't claim that he brought stability to ESCOM because we were on our way to bringing stability and dealing with load shedding long before he came there.
Well, I never engaged with Mr. Matuna on those matters, nor did I involve myself in the issues with Mr. Matuna. He was suspended and they asked me to be acting GCE, and I went there in an acting capacity. And while I was acting, I don't know if he resigned or what happened, but he left on a permanent basis. So that was it. And then after some time, they said, would you consider being the actual GCE? And I said, well, that is fine, especially because I think at that point, we were working on something that I thought could help us with resolving the problem of load shedding, because it was about plant availability. I said today that I did not resolve the problem of load shedding, and I mentioned young engineers who came up with the idea of Tetris that helped us resolve the problem of load shedding. So I did not claim that I resolved load shedding.
Is that how you arrived in Transnet as well, where you just arrive in a huge state-owned corporation like ESCOM and you do not even care to take information from your predecessor? Is that how you arrived, and you didn't even get to know what was happening, what are developments? You just hit the ground running and focused on the way forward?
Yeah, I think this thing of handover is overrated. I've said that before. The best way to appraise the situation is without the baggage of what had been happening in the past, and to get in there objectively, listen to everybody, make an appreciation of the situation on your own without being bombarded by the perceptions or the problems of the past. So generally, incidentally, Mr. Shivambu, when I went to the PIC, there was no handover. When I went to Transnet, there was no handover. When I went to ESCOM, there was no handover. And I would not classify any of those assignments as failures.
And then the process of the request for proposals and the request for information which ESCOM issued concerning the nuclear build program, did it happen when you were in ESCOM? How did that come about? Where was that decision taken that ESCOM was going to procure nuclear?
It was a cabinet decision.
It was a cabinet decision that you must start the RFP and RFI process for the procurement of nuclear.
Yeah, I think there was a cabinet subcommittee and then a cabinet decision.
And then you said perhaps elsewhere that you went to familiarize yourself with how nuclear energy functions. When did you do that and where?
I did it in the course of 2016 at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There is a course on a nuclear reactor course, nuclear reactor technology. I did that course at MIT. I thought I gave you a crash course on that at some point.
Do you know the time where the Oak Bay bought the uranium mine? Was it not around the same period?
No.
When was
they
it?
bought the uranium mine when I was at the PIC.
But the major investments of the Shiva arrangements and all of those didn't happen
Shiva when I
ESCOM?
was at the PIC.
And then the listing, when did it happen? Didn't it happen during the period that you were in ESCOM?
I can't remember. I never followed that properly.
And how then do you respond to a view that the whole rush to utilizing nuclear as another source of energy was linked, one, to Gupta's interest, two, to the fact that senior government officials took a bribe from the Russians in order to implement a nuclear energy program, I meant to say?
I don't know anything about those allegations, but from what I know, from a technical point of view, and what I know about Quebec, is that Quebec is currently giving us the cheapest source of electricity. The problem with nuclear is that the upfront costs are very high, but the life of a nuclear plant is about 80 years with very cheap electricity. The issues are the safety issues which can be managed, that have been managed. The United States has 99 nuclear reactors all over the United States. France gets over 70% of its electricity from nuclear. The Chinese are doing it. The Chinese are building nuclear reactors. I do not understand why we in Africa who do not have electricity are afraid of nuclear, or we are being made to fear nuclear. From a technical point of view, without bringing in the politics and the Russians and so on and so forth, if we just look at the matter objectively and remove, for example, if you say, let's procure nuclear from a country that is competent to provide us with nuclear reactors, without naming what the country is, would you arrive at the same conclusion? I think people have a fear for Russia that I don't understand. But I don't mind. We can obtain it from the United States or from China or from the Japanese, who are very competent. The thing is we have to get, or the French even, the thing is we have to get technology that is compatible with what we already have here and what we already know, which is, yeah.
What
By the way,
what about the?
By the way,
what about the concern that the present fiscal capacity can accommodate a hugely expensive nuclear build program? Isn't that a genuine concern?
I have said that it is possible to fund this thing without touching the fiscus. What you do is you ring fence future revenue from the nuclear plants and raise capital against that. That was my view anyway. And in fact, at the time when the Public Protector's report came out and I decided to take early retirement, we had been working on possible financial models to do that. So it's objective. I mean, if people want to criticize that you can't do that, it must be on technical On a technical basis, not that the Russians did that, minister signed the contract, and so on and so forth.
What do you mean? I mean, are you saying that we must not care about the fiscal complications and consequences of nuclear? We must just look at the technical issues narrowly like that. Is that what you're saying?
No, but we're going to the other extreme here. We're forgetting the technical issues completely.
Then your justification of the Together deal is Optimum Coal had already given or had already sold the coal to Together, and that prepayments are standard in ESCOM. You then gave the prepayment to Together so that they could give you the coal, and they ultimately delivered the coal. And then through an arbitration process, the 2.1 billion which OCH was owing to ESCOM was later on reduced to about 600 million. Why is it that that prepayment that you gave to Together was exactly the same amount which Together needed to purchase Optimum Coal Holdings or mine?
It wasn't. If you look at P.S. Marsden's testimony, he says they were short of 600 million.
And how much did we pay?
We bought coal for 586.
I think we must revisit those figures there, because the figures that were given here point to the fact that the exact amount that was needed to conclude the deal is what ESCOM ultimately paid in a meeting which was called midnight, just the day before the deal could expire or the deal could flop.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? Don't you think that you were being utilized as a vehicle, as a means to close a deal for a Gupta and Duduzane Zuma's owned company?
Yeah. Firstly, I have said I had not been at that meeting. I was not at that meeting on the 11th, firstly. But secondly, in understanding the transaction, because I did get to understand it, P.S. Marsden's thing talks about 600 million, that he even tried to go and borrow from the banks and they refused to give it to him. It was 600 million. The deal was 586 million to provide coal for 3 months, May, June, and July. The coal was provided. Now, the cost of load shedding, which is the cost of not having, if we had not had the coal, for example, for one reason or another, and we were running short of supplies of coal during winter. I heard today Veneta Klein saying it is 450 million rand a day. If we can avoid load shedding by doing a prepayment and buying coal, prepaying coal and making sure that we have coal. If we had not done it, you would be asking us today, Mr. Shivambu, why didn't you do that deal so that you can avoid load shedding?
And then what is it? Can you please just take us through the process that reduced the amount which Optimum Coal was owing ESCOM from 2.1 billion to 600 million? What exactly happened?
That was after I had left, but my understanding is that the matter went for arbitration, which...
So the person who did that was Machela Kuku, was the acting CEO.
Yeah, and the CFO. They will come here.
And Arnold Singh.
You can ask them what, because it was
Okay,
actually
no, that's fine. Yeah,
apparently very, very technical.
And then the McKinsey Trillion consulting services, did it happen when you were in ESCOM?
The consulting services happened.
I'm speaking about this specific one which ended up with the 1.5 billion rand payment.
The payments
Did it happen when you were in ESCOM?
The payments were made during this year.
Yeah?
This year.
But the whole consulting services happened when you were still in ESCOM?
There was an agreement with McKinsey, and that they would subcontract to Trillion. The question was there an agreement to subcontract, the subcontracting agreement? There are different versions of what happened there, and I'm sure that when Mr. Singh comes here, he will be able to explain. But it involved getting permission from the Treasury to get the subcontracting agreement to be done. Now, there's a difference of opinion as to whether that permission was granted or not. But I'm not, that can be shed light on by Mr. Singh and I think Mr. Koko.
Yeah, we'll deal with it there. You say that you have not subjected the state of capture report of the public protector to a judicial review because of a legal advice. What legal advice is that? Because I'm saying this because in your official submission, you are trying to turn upside down the observations or notes, whatever you call them, of the public protector. You go into town saying that no, the phones were not 9, were actually this number and all of those things there. What kind of legal advice is that you should not do a judicial review? What does it say?
It says the report had no findings. So if the report has no findings, there's nothing to review.
But even if it doesn't have findings, Colonel Mulife, the observations, its status is that it has got a local stand, it has got a legal standing as a perspective, and your countenance to what is contained in the public protector report means absolutely nothing, because you are not authority, you are not law, and the public protector's office, as has been confirmed by the Constitutional Court, is authority that is established by the Constitution.
Senior counsel disagrees with you, and I'm not the lawyer, I take legal advice.
But isn't that pretty obvious that a report of the public protector, which has got a legal standing, which is established by the Constitution, which is established additionally by the Public Protector Act, make certain observations about your movements, about your conduct, and everything else, and then you fold your arms and say, no, I'm not going to say anything, but when you come here, you want us to listen to you, and you want us to believe what you are saying against a legal document that is a product of investigation by the Office of the Public Protector. How should we relate to your information vis-a-vis the Public Protector's information?
Well, counsel says the Constitutional Court has said findings.
What is the name of the counsel? What is his name?
Mr. Graves.
Oh, Mr. Graves.
Mr. Graves, Matuna.
Okay. What does it say?
It says the Constitutional Court has said findings are binding. I don't know what that means. So it is a matter that has been ventilated about there has to be findings. And my reading of it is that until there are findings, it's just fresh air.
Do you know the findings, right, and remedial action are a product of investigation in terms of what the public protector would otherwise do. You can't say that in a public protector report, the only thing that is binding is the tail end and what have been the observations, the building blocks towards the finding do not matter. Like, let's give an example with Nkandla. There's certain findings which are possibly one page. And those findings are a product of the events that happened with Minentle, the architect, which happened with the officials in the Public Works Department, and all of those things there. Those are the building blocks to the ultimate end. And then the findings are the ones that then say that this is what we think should be remedial action. Isn't that basic logic, Colonel?
Well, Mr. Shivam, that was the legal advice that I got, and I am not competent in that area. And so maybe I will live to regret it one day. Let's
do this. Let's do this. I think that is what will be the attitude of. I think that should be the attitude of the committee as well. That unless the observations and the notes and the building blocks of the public protector have been reviewed in a judicial process. We're going to take them as fact, as final. We can't, because you are not authority of law, we can't say that Colonel Brian Molefe has given us an alternate vision, and then we're going to compare that against the public protector, which is a constitutional establishment. And then we are not sure which one to believe. We've got no choice as parliament. We have to take the part of the public protector. Is that a sensible approach?
No.
Why not?
It just isn't a sensible approach.
Like, how, are you saying that?
I have said, Mr. Shivambo, that
Are you saying that Vesav, like compared to your information, your note here, we must believe you instead of the public protector? Is that what you are saying we should do?
I've given you the answer that there was nothing to review. There were no findings. That is
But
what
I'm
the lawyers
saying in
say.
terms of the observations that are there, because the public protector says that
I have
you have
also
received 45 calls from Ajay Gupta, you have been very close to Ajay Gupta, which is a solid observation. What do we believe now in terms of the legal standing? Your lawyer is there, he can whisper to you again. What do we believe between you and the public protector?
Mr. Shivambo, can you tell me the phone calls from Mr. AJ Gupta? One phone call, from which number, when?
But the public protector has dealt with that. I'm not investigating the issue.
She hasn't.
But it's there in the public protector's report.
She just says there were phone calls. She doesn't say when and how, from which number.
But it has got legal standing. It has got weight because it comes from public protector.
My legal advice is that it does not have legal standing. Just because you want it to have legal standing does not mean it has legal standing, Mr. Shivambo. I know you're a very powerful man from the EFF. But just because you have a desire for it to have legal standing does not automatically make it to have legal standing. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Do you know, Mr. Molefe, if I don't know what is the tragedy now, because your lawyer is sitting next to you and he is misleading you in a profound and spectacular way, right?
You rather you were my lawyer.
So it's just basic logic. Let's live. Let's.
But Mr. Shivambo,
yes,
I will choose him as a lawyer than you.
Or you can choose a constitutional structure which is established by the Constitution.
I will not choose Ms. Madonsela.
Or you can choose the
lawyer.
Constitutional Court's interpretation of public protector reports, which say that the reports of the public protector are binding unless subject to judicial review.
There's no finding.
Like the context is that the findings are a product of a process of investigation and observations.
That process was not finished, Mr. Shivambo. The public protector says these matters must be investigated further. That process was not finished. She was in a hurry to finish this report. It was not finished properly. I don't understand why. She did not allow the new public protector to finish the investigation. She was in too much of a hurry to call it the final report.
No, that's fine. I think we'll deal with that at a different level. The last question is, what is your definition of retirement? I'm exiting now. What is your definition of retirement? Or you can ask the lawyer again.
No, I can Google it.
Okay, yeah, please do. Please do.
I don't know, Mr. Shivambo, let me look for it and then I'll come back to you on it.
No, please, because there's a clear context which you want to deal with. What is retirement? Because my reading of retirement is that when you leave employment permanently, in a public statement that you issued, you said that I'm leaving ESCOM, I'm exploring what next step to take, and less than 4 months later, you are sworn in as a member of parliament, which is the next step, which nullifies the notion of a backdated letter that you are retired from ESCOM. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, the retirement has the effect that you have left.
Oh, so if you leave employment is retirement, is that your definition?
No, you can resign, you can retire, you can.
But I'm asking about retirement, your understanding of retirement. Are you saying that if I leave Parliament and decide to be full-time international relations officer in the head office of the EFF tomorrow, I'll say I've retired? Even when I'm in the immediate aftermath of my retirement, and then I say I'm retiring, and then is that
Mr. Shivambu,
retirement?
if you write a letter to Parliament
Yes.
and ask to retire, and Parliament says, we have approved your application to retire, then you are retired.
Isn't that simplistic, Kenya?
Things don't need to be complicated, Mr. Shivambu. You don't have to complicate everything.
Do you know that we will deal with the merits and assessment of your submissions? But the fact of the matter, Chair, is that Mr. Brian Molefe did not retire from ESCOM. He resigned, and he publicly communicated that it was accepted by the board and by the minister. And when the narrative of his pension fund could not be fit properly by his resignation, he then claimed that he has resigned, and then backdated a letter of retirement to Mr. Ben Gubane, who, by all means and purposes, is not a credible human being. But we'll deal with that when we come to assessment and recommendations of what should happen with the whole information that is being provided here.
Chair, I think that it is unfortunate that what Mr. Shivambu is trying to do is to force feed the findings of this August committee in its work. I think, Mr. Shivambu, today we made the presentation, the questions were asked. That comment must be reserved for when you want to make the findings. I think it is a bit premature for you to be jumping to conclusions at this early stage.
Thank you very much. That was the last response. And Honorable Shivambu, you have exceeded Honorable Mazoni's record. I'm recording all the minutes today, now, this evening.